Hi, my name is Tijl Koenderink, and I come here from two different perspectives. One is a company that I've been running for about 7 years now, which is Novilo, where we guide primary, middle, high school aged schools. We guide the teachers for these gifted children to help them both in regular settings, in pull-out programs, in full-time gifted solutions. And what I've noticed in that is that, especially when you go to the full-time classes for the gifted, within Holland, we very specifically made the choice to not just make it achievement schools. That allowed some countries that have chosen to make their education system for the gifted completely aimed just at high achievers. And in Holland, you see a trend more towards, let's see if the potential is there, and if the potential is there and it doesn't come out, what can we do to help these children? But especially in these full-time programs, you start seeing that you get the twice exceptional kids with autism, ADHD, poor executive functions and stuff like that. All kinds of blockades which inhibit them in developing that talent into like an actual skill or actual performance. And most recently, we started 3 weeks ago, I started Feniks, and it's actually kind of, reborn from the ashes of the Center of Creative Leren. I see Albert or Chantal, some of the other people who worked there in the past year, give presentations on it. It's a place where the talented dropouts go to when they've gone to 3, 4, sometimes 5 schools, often are depressed to the point of being suicidal and have been given up by the school system, end up here, and here starts the rehabilitation process of getting a happy and productive life. And in that process, I've seen a lot of problems and a lot of challenges that kids can run into. But one of the biggest challenges I find is that, maybe you noticed that, because most of you are advisors of gifted children or parents or teachers, is that people ask you for advice. You know, I've got a highly gifted perfectionist. What should I do? And you're like, well, I need a lot more information than that to be able to give any kind of sensible answer. So what I've been looking at is how to group these children in the types of problems they have, so you can be more specific in the type of guidance you. Because when I was looking at the proposal that I was writing, that'd be about the digital age and the gifted, the first thing that came to mind is there's nothing I can say sensibly without first making that distinction. Like, where is this kid in his or her development? At a very base, impulsive stage, or is he very goal-oriented, or where in his life development, personality? And once you figure that out, then you can start talking about the role of the digital age in helping that or actually hindering that. A preamble, the first 30 minutes are going to be kind of a high-paced walkthrough of the theory. The second 30 minutes I hope to be mostly doing questions and see what kind of stuff you want to know things about. It's going to be based on spiral dynamics, which has been set up by Claire Graves and developed through by Beck and Cohen. And its most recent version, Spiral Dynamics Interval, which is Wilbur, which is a way of looking at, an integral way of looking at people and their development. It can be an overview of the theory, but I want to make it as interactive as possible. And mostly I want to give you an introduction in a new way of thinking, a new way of categorizing. There are many nuances now. Like if I want to do this training properly, I would have to take 2 days, 60 minutes. So ask for nuance, and there's a lot of research-backed theory available, so I'll definitely do that, or if you want, I can send you along this like that. But I'm going to try to give you the overview mostly. But a big disclaimer, I am not a researcher. I barely finished high school. My highest degree is a sports massage therapist, so that's officially my qualification for being here. But what I try to do, and that's what I try to do with schools as well, because I've got a lot of practice. We've guided 300 schools in the Netherlands, both in primary and school education. Coached a lot of both adolescents, students, and I've given a lot of classes to them. So I found a number of pragmatic frameworks as a way of making. If you are a researcher and you're looking for something to research, please contact me. I think this is definitely a great area that we can go into that will yield a very high result in answer. So we're going to give you a quick overview of spiral dynamics. And spiral dynamics is a system that Claire Graves designed after he found out that in his Psychology 101 introduction courses, he found out that he was teaching contradictory materials. Like one day he was teaching, this is what the behaviorists say. The behaviorists say that there's stimulus and response and that's always connected, and with operant conditioning you can train anything to anyone. But then 2 weeks later you'll be teaching, oh, this is cognitive behavioral therapy. And actually stimulus response is not connected to each other because there's a process, you can change that. And that's actually more important than the stimulus response process going on. So those are contradictory theories, but they both work. They both are applied in clinical settings and they both have success rate. So how can that be? And what Graves then did is put that into a model. He suggested maybe it's the case that at different developmental levels that somebody is, a different psychological theory is valid. And this came out to be spiral dynamics, which actually the first version is pretty complicated, a lot of additional words. Don Beck and Cohen have kind of simplified it, used the color coding language. Most of their books are aimed at organizational reform, but Ken Wilber kind of put it back into psychotherapy and development. And one of the things they do is they assign colors. Because once you start talking about levels of development, you run the risk of saying this one is better than that one. You are at a better level of development and you are inferior because you are only there. And to me, that's kind of the same thing as saying, a 4-year-old is worse than a 16-year-old. A 16-year-old is clearly better. No, he's not better. He's not better or worse. He's more developed. He's more potential. He's more options. He's more complicated. But it's not better or worse. So they assign colors, and the first color you assign is beige. And I'm going to give you the kind of pop psychology version of this story, and then I'm going to give you some of the theories behind it. Beige, the color, is actually where we start as a baby. As a baby, you start at the sensomotoric developmental level. And it's all about the physical needs. I'm hungry, I want to eat, it needs to be warm, I need to be physically safe, and I want to make sure that I don't fall and stuff like that. As long as I don't have that, I'm unhappy. As soon as I have that, I start developing into the next line. The next level after beige is purple. And what you see with children, once they're sure they've got food, once they're sure that they're safe, they start looking for new things. And belonging is one of the most important parts of that process. I want to belong to the family. I want to make sure that I don't get cast out of the family that I'm in. So I want to make sure that they accept me. In Dutch they call it the hechtingsfase. I don't know what it actually would be in English. Like attachment, yeah, attachment phase. And it's the starting process of ego development. Because in the beige phase, a baby actually doesn't know the difference between myself and my mother and my environment. That's all one. I can't differentiate. The purple level is the start of that differentiation. One of the things that belongs in that phase is superstition. The world appears to be a magical place where things magically happen. We've got a magical god of the water faucet that makes water come out. We've got this magical god of sun and wind, and everything happens. Wow, it's all magical. If you, as a parent, guide your kid through that attachment phase in a good way, and your kid is very safely attached, then you get rewarded with the terrible twos. Because then he gets an attitude. Because he knows he's safe, he knows he won't be abandoned. The next question is, oh, well, if I am a separate person from you, then I want something. And actually I want something different than what you want from me. Let's explore that. And that's a red phase. The red phase is about power, drive, ego, and the question, I want it, I'm going to go for it. And this is a very primal, impulsive version. Not weighed out in 20 years, I want to be here and I'm going to work towards it, but I'm hungry, I feel like cookies, and if there's a big jar of cookies on the table, I will walk to the cookies, I will stuff them in my mouth till my belly aches, and yeah, that's about it. And spiral dynamics says, especially at the coming 3 levels, you go to the next level when in this level you don't get what you want. But as long as you get what you want, you don't have to develop. So say that we've got this big jar of cookies and I walk up to it and I stuff them in my mouth and they go away and nothing happens. then I don't have a reason to change, because life is good. But what if I try to take a cookie, and I get a slap on my fingers from mommy, mommy's angry, and I don't get any cookies. But when I listen to mommy and I do what she says, I get 2 cookies a day. You know, the effectiveness of listening seems to outweigh the effectiveness of just trying to take it. It doesn't work. And that's the introduction of the blue phase. The blue phase is about rules and roles. If I abide by the rules, if I take on the right role, then I will be happy. Because I try to be happy impulsively, but that got people mad with me. So I figured that maybe if I listen to what the rules are and I take on the right role, then I'll be fine. And this is also characterized by an ultimate truth. The kid is looking for the ultimate truth. What is the right way to be? You need to show me what the right way to be is, because then I can be what I should be. And when I'm what I should be, everybody will be happy. But this has, as a negative side, the us versus them talk. Because that's what you see in very tight groups, like churches, but even in extreme versions, sects and cults, that there's an extreme blue tendency. If you abide by the rule, if you take the right role, if you share our ultimate truth, then we are okay and they are bad. It's very much us versus them work. And that, at some point, is going to not work anymore. Well, the example I usually give is kind of a simplistic one, but imagine you're standing in the middle of nowhere in front of a traffic light, and it's red. It's 2 a.m. at night, and you're sitting there, and it stays red. Nothing is happening. And you're looking around, and you're thinking, you know, the rule might be that it's red and I'm not allowed to drive, but what am I waiting for? So, at some point you decide, the end result is that I should get across safely, right? That's the point. So, you go across, and then you also go across into orange. Because as opposed to blindly abiding by the rules, it's about success. It's about the result. It's where do I want to end up? And that's what a lot of people find out in their life, you know. Just living according to every single rule doesn't get you very far. At some point you change that into, you set a goal, and once we go towards that goal, then we'll be fine. And this is also the advent of science and democracy. Because blue, if you take as the integral theory, also applies this on an anthropological level. We as species have done the same. We started climbing out of the trees as monkeys, figuring out what are we going to eat. The next assignment we had as a species was, how can we band together in little tribes so we can be safe together? And the next step was, well, if we're a safe tribe, then we're going to smash each other's head in, because I want to be the biggest, you know, kahuna of the tribe. But then when we started bashing each other's head in, that started to get, you know, a nuisance after a while. So then we figured, you know, let's set up some rules so we abide by the rules for each other. And then after a while we came to orange and we started saying, well, maybe there's an objective truth that can be learned. It's about success and ambition. We're almost through, by the way. There's not an infinite number of levels, in case you're starting to worry by now. Orange has its problems too. I'm going to talk about the sick versions of some of these levels. The sick version of orange is Wall Street capitalism. Blind success and ambition and goal-driven. Everything needs a part because I've got a goal. Money could be the only goal. And after a while you find out, green, that the world is bigger than me or my bank account or my success. Maybe I don't just want, but I want farmers in Africa to be successful too. So I want fair trade products. And I want the biological chicken in the supermarket because I want the chicken to have a little bit of happiness too. So my world becomes a little bit bigger and I start taking care of other people. And this is a holistic process. And this is also a process of pluralism. We start seeing multiple perspectives. You know, where I don't agree with what's happening in Arabia or in Africa, I can understand why they're doing it. By looking at it anthropologically, you start having understanding for the way they look at the world. This is the first tier. And the first tier is characterized by I am right and the others are wrong. Because each of these levels thinks that they have the ultimate truth. If you look at these different levels, somebody in red just says, this is the only way to live. Because I described it as a youth level, but actually in practice, there are people 40 years old that are still red. They're still just in the power drive, I want impulsive actions. And they shall say, these stupid hippies in green, all the, oh, we should take care of each other. If everybody just does what he wants and takes what he wants, then everybody's happy, right? But the hippies in green think, oh, these barbarians in red, why are they so stupid and so primitive that they're just taking what they want? Why don't they, like us, see the world as a multi-perspectival, beautiful place? So they have a hard time dealing with each other. And that's a cool thing that starts at the second tier, at the yellow. At yellow, evolution becomes aware of itself. Because here we start to see, hey, these are all these different developments. And they all have their place. And it's healthy to guide kids through that. Oh, it's good that maybe that with a 2-year-old you're strict, 6-year-old you're not. And with a child you're different than with a regular child. Now we're starting to have perspective on the different perspectives. And we can try to give them a place. So it's called integral, focus on healthy spiral dynamics. Every part of the spiral needs a spot. And each perspective has its own role. When I want a police officer, I prefer to have a blue police officer who believes in roles and rules. Because if I get a green police officer, he will always debate with everybody whether it be a good idea to write out a fine now or not. What the bigger perspective would be of this fine that I'm citing. Probably wouldn't work very well. On the other hand, I'm happy that the Prime Minister in Holland is pretty orange. Because if you make a green person a Prime Minister, he will talk and talk and talk, but not a lot will happen. On the other hand, I'm very happy that we've got a lot of green people in our cabinet, because they keep checks and balances. They constantly are scanning, is everybody still on board? So now we're trying to have every perspective have its own. The last one is kind of theoretical, but in yellow you have this cognitive understanding. You can analyze it, and this is more of a being and an intuiting version of it. This is kind of the non-dualistic, all perspectives are part of one big whole. It's all one big. I'll make sure, by the way, that I'll send out the handouts after all parts in the schedule. So this is a quick overview of the different levels. One of the things that spiral dynamics says as well is that you can reach somebody at the level he's at or one level higher. You can't go much beyond that. An example I often give is, imagine a soccer hooligan. You know, one of those guys who's breaking the city and walking around fighting with everybody. What color would you give that person? What color would that be? Ooh, participation. Red. If you have a group of football hooligans, by the way, they're made up of 2 colors usually. Red and purple. Yeah, there are a couple who out of themselves will go out and create fuss, and there are a couple who are joining the group and out of peer pressure don't dare to say no. But those are 2 different levels that they're at, and they need to be treated differently, by the way, as well. Imagine that this red football hooligan, I'm going to try to persuade it with green. Oh, it makes me so sad when you do this. Look at the bigger perspective. You know, the football stadium is all wrecked. Don't think he's going to do a whole lot. Let's try orange then. You know what it would cost to build a new football stadium? How much work went into that? Not a lot of impressed feelings. Blue starts to work. If you do this, I'll send you to jail. If you do that, you'll get a fine. These are the rules, these are the consequences. Well, in Holland, you've got kind of like the military police or the SWAT units. When you've got big, the MA they call it in Dutch. When you've got a big soccer match or something, well, these are the heavily trained police officers, and they can go to red as well. I will hit harder than as a persuasion method, which helps for the ones who are not quite as developed. But this is a yellow perspective. A yellow perspective is to say, I know we need these. I don't want to be that person, but we need it to make our entire society work. To add some things in a more theoretical perspective, each of these levels has its own psychopathology or its problem, when it goes wrong. When you look at the base level, the sensomotoric level, when that goes wrong, you see people who have problems with psychosis. So they can't differentiate between what actually comes in through the senses and what they are creating themselves in their head, and autism. I'm first going to go to the psychopathology, and then we're going to go through the lessons to be learned. These are the things that are hardest to solve, especially in a talking. this quickly goes to medication like that, because it's such a fundamental brain level that these things occur. The problem that occurs at purple, when the purple level development doesn't go as it normally should, is borderline and the narcissistic personality. Because both are characteristic by a person having problems with differentiating between me and the other, and both have the tendency to keep up a false self and keep their own real self hidden. The process of that ego development, where I become a separate person and I'm allowed to be a person, hasn't completely gone through yet. And you see that in clinging or ego-inflating behavior. When things go wrong in red, you see things like conduct disorder and oppositional defiance. These are classical, way too impulsive children or adults that have a hard time controlling those impulses. When things go red and blue, you see people either obsessive compulsive or the unhealthy forms of perfectionism, because of too much pressure to try to conform to the role that I should be taking. The risk of orange is rampant capitalism and workaholism. What you see, by the way, is that they get less pathological as you go down. Why? Because the entire being has developed to a more complete, rounded self. It has a more cognitive function to its capacity, to its use, so we can control the problems better. The problem of green can be, and maybe you've seen that, it's what Ken Wilber calls aperspectival madness. When you start to go on this pluralism path, different viewpoints are okay, you usually run into problems at some point. What, for instance, if being green and I want to respect all different views of the world, I look at Africa, where women are being circumcised involuntarily, painfully, even die in the process. Part of me says that's not okay, but the green part of me says, well, but it's their culture, I should. So you notice that it starts to create inner conflict, and sometimes even identity crisis, and paralysis by analysis. That's why they talk so much, because they constantly want to look at all the different perspectives, but sometimes have problems getting into action. And that's what you see at the yellow level, it starts coming to. The way I look at it, in terms of working with children, working in schools, working with dropouts, is that every level has a lesson to be learned. And some people haven't learned these lessons. A kid who has problems at beige has not learned the world is a physically safe place. You see that with immigrants out of extremely poor countries that are coming from war areas. I've heard stories about people who teach these children, and they say, what we actually need to do is put the lunch food on the table at the beginning of the day, so they can see it while we're running the class. Because if they don't see the food, they can't study. Because they're constantly worrying there might not be food today. So once it's inside, and once the water is inside and the toilet's inside, then I can start relaxing. This is pretty intense if you start being insecure at this. The next level, purple, is I am okay and I belong to a group. And even if the group doesn't accept me, still okay. And I can still trust myself. This is an area that a lot of gifted children have. Why? They came into groups that didn't accept them. That told them, you are not okay. You are only okay if you try to be something else. I'm going to add another layer to it later, but for now, they have a lot of trouble in purple. And that's why we see, especially dropouts, that you often see the borderline. In very few cases, it's a beige problem. Usually, it's not about I'm scared that I'll be exiled, thrown out of. And secondary to that is the fear that I might not survive. But primary, it's the group. I'm wondering if. But this is a discussion. I mean, this has a lot of nuances, especially when you start taking the lines of integral theory in consideration as well. We'll get there. The red lesson is assertiveness. I'm allowed to want something. And I know what I want. And usually you see that girls might have more problems in the purple area, by the way, boys have more problems in the blue area, girls have more problems in girls have more problem in I want it, I am allowed to, and even if everybody doesn't like it, I still want it. So that's actually a lesson that a lot of them need to learn. That's one of the things that we do with the dropouts as well. Find out how to trigger that again. So I want something. You're allowed to want it. This is a safe place where you can want weird things. The blue level is discipline. I can control myself, someone else. And the prime lesson, the way it looks like practically, is usually exactly like where Impact Awesome in teaching not instant gratification but delayed gratification, response inhibition, emotion. Those are blue lessons. I learned to control my primary impulses to function in a group system. I can control myself. The orange level brings it up to the next level. Self-discipline. I can control myself for myself. I've got a project. And I can handle long-term projects. Because a red person can get enthusiastic, but burns out within hours. And the orange person can go on for months. He's got a long-term objective, control himself all the way up there. And in green, you learn to have a broader perspective within that project. I'm going to do a project for me, but I'm going to do a project to serve my community, my country, or people in Africa or whatever. I'm going to leave the other two for what they are for now, because I don't have unlimited time overloading you with theory anyway. Quick, are there questions thus far about the model or about level? Then on to the digital age. Because when I started making an inventory of the different interventions that I know, and the problems and the risk and the possibility, they immediately started clicking with the different levels. Like when you talk about the base level, the possibilities of the digital age are awesome. There are so many compensation possibilities for kids with actually physically or sensomotoric disabilities that would not have been able to function in any kind of education system, but now they can. Dealing with dyslexia, dyscalculia, like voice to text, the Kurzweil systems, and stuff like that, special glasses which regulate the amount of light that comes in, special hearing aids that amplify or amplify noise. So they compensate for actually sensomotoric problems. The risk is that we are overcompensating for students. Students that might have been mildly dyslexic in the past, who would have been forced to work their way through it, and by working harder find their own strategies and learn to deal with it, because they pretty early get detected and pretty early get compensating measures. They have less of a push to develop that ability. It doesn't have to be a problem, but this is a risk that you always have to keep in mind as soon as you start compensating, especially at young age. When you look at the purple level, the awesome thing is they can find peers wherever they are. Even if you live at the end of the world, in the middle of nowhere. Like my parents immigrated to France, and they took my sister with them. And they lived in a little rural area, but she had an extremely vibrant social life online. Because as long as you've got an internet connection, you can always find real peers. If you know where to look, if you know how to do that, you can go to forums, social media, boys. You've got those massive multiplayer online role-playing games and stuff like that. This gives you the feeling of belonging to a group, even if every day you have to go to a school system that doesn't understand you, with kids that don't understand you. If you can then go to a digital world where you can find that relationship, you get the process that James Webb called the inoculation process. That if there is a group where you are okay, then you're inoculated against the world where people think you're not okay. Because then you think, well, they don't understand me, but I'm still okay. You're still learning that purple. The risk is that you start surviving on those virtual. You don't try to go into actual relationships, because they are actually a lot more complicated and a lot more. It's a lot safer to computing. So it can be a good bridge step, but it shouldn't be the only step. And sometimes you see cult-like tendencies, really like forums which develop like this in-crowd, out-cry kind of mentality, impossible to outsiders. They even start distancing themselves more and more from the normal people, as they call them, or actually they start giving negative names to them. So that can have the risk as well. The red area. The awesome thing about the digital age is that you can be that superhero you want to be. Because that's the red drive, I want impulse, I want to be that superhero, and the digital age lets you. From both computer games, instant gratification, all these growth methods allow you to do that. Whether it's going to be through playing a video game, I can really literally build up my superhero, to learning to program. Because by learning to program, you learn to control a part of the world. While maybe physically you wouldn't be able to control that part of the world. In the virtual world, you can actually build stuff. You can make stuff happen. Sims and theme park are awesome. So the role-playing games, but also physical simulators, but also 3D printers. They gave you a sense of, I can control the world. I am powerful, and when I want something, I can give that a place. The risk is that you get addicted to these instant gratification algorithms, because these games are actually built to keep you there. There are actually complete scientific studies that study the process of dopamine release while playing video games. Dopamine is the kind of reward system of your brain, and the video game is built in such a way that every time that the kid gets slightly distracted, he gets a new dopamine shot, a little reward, 10 points, 100 points, 100 million zillion points, and a star, and a new sword, and a new money, and I don't know what. But this reward makes the red person, because it keeps in this impulsive mode. And the trick is, and some games are really good at it, if you use that in a good way, you can have adaptive friction towards growth. Because on the other hand, there are computer games that actually are able to frustrate kids for 10 hours in a row without giving them a reward, because they build up to that. The problems get harder and harder, so the kids do have to call upon those executive skills to push through. But it depends on, has it been built to make the kid kind of lazy and addicted to the game, or has it been built to build up the kid to a strength where he can actually do something? And some kids get this unrealistic superhero self-image, because in a computer game I can beat everybody up. Well, that's not something that you translate to real life. Roles. A lot of kids in this area are extremely happy with the fact that computers are a fair world. Dealing with people is always messy. I might have done the right thing at the right time, but with the wrong person, and it still got messy. But a computer, if I type something and I did the right thing, it works. If it doesn't work, I know it's my fault because it's completely logical. It's always the rules and roles, it's completely right. So it's awesome. You can learn to program, and those are a couple of programs you can use. Alice is more geared towards girls in general. You can write stories, and the stories are built in such a way that you can kind of write a storyboard. First this happens, and then that happens, and if this, then that. But that's combined with a complete cartoon environment. So what you see is that girls will tend to first write a story and then program towards that, and guys will start programming and then figure out a story that went with the thing that I built. But both are good development processes. Game makers, same kind of thing. Lego Mindstorms allows you to physically build things, and Code Academy is a way where you can online learn to code for free, completely in step by step with a lot of feedback and stuff like that. So anybody, a 6-year-old who's bright enough and speaks English, just learn to program. Orange, success and ambitions. The cool thing about the digital age, and I think somebody mentioned it before, there's the ultimate meritocracy. It's the ultimate place where I'm only judged by the results. Nobody's going to look at me and say, oh, you're just a 10-year-old kid, I don't care. Because if you build a cool program, if you build a cool website, if you build cool content, people will come and be happy. You don't even have to show that you're happy. You can just build that work. It's ultimately based on that what you do. It makes it so much fairer and easier to attract that success. Because it's so unfair when you have that skill, when you have that talent, and you get ignored because you just don't happen to have, the right age or the right sex or whatever. And you can start a company, become a millionaire or a non-profit. the world. You can do whatever you want to do. You see, examples coming by on Facebook, 13-year-old, 14-year-old, 50-year-old kids who contribute to cancer research just because they dove into it. MIT courseware, you can actually start an MIT course no matter what your age is. So it's a lot more flat, the world. You've got programs, things like Kickstarter, eBay, Elance, Odesk are places to work on. I know a couple of 14-year-olds who do work. They do programming work for companies, and they're cheaper than any adult because they're happy to make like €6 an hour. So they can outbid pretty much anyone. The problem is that it can flip on them. The addiction to success and money played out through things like online poker, illegal gambling, illegal trading, selling copied goods, and that kind of that can be. It's an unregulated area. That's a problem. It needs to be. And the holistic thing, you can join charitable, political causes. People, the online version of Greenpeace, their political party, even though they are not socially strong enough to say, I'm actually going to go out and go there, or I'm not old enough, my parents are not allow me to go to evening meetings, I can still join them and learn unlimited perspective. I can learn about all kinds of charities, like Charity Watch, Navigators, philanthropy.com. And I can learn about them and I can contribute to whatever I want to. But I can also be completely overwhelmed with all the different viewpoints and get nihilistic. Because this is one of the problems. The spiral dynamics model makes it look like somebody is at one level. You are orange, you are blue. But with more elaborate versions, I'm going to see if I can get one. In more elaborate versions, you actually don't have one level, but you have almost unlimited lines. And you can have a different development in each line. You can have a cognitive development at green. I am cognitively smart enough to understand the world from all kinds of perspectives. But maybe emotionally, I'm still at purple. I just want to belong to the group. If you take, for instance, one of those ambulance chaser lawyers. You've got them in America, right? The guys who are a lawyer and they actually follow ambulances to, give them your card. If you want to sue them, just call me. And those guys are, maybe probably appearing in orange-green in terms of cognitive development. They understand how the world works. These world bankers who completely messed up the entire world, they're brilliant cognitively. They understand all the perspectives of how the world works. But they're operating from an emotional perspective of red. I want. What do I want today? And now I will use my brain that can understand the world to satisfy my emotional need that only cares about. I just slowly am embodying ego. And that's what you see with these kids as well. This is where it goes wrong or it becomes tricky. Because they're not just disharmonious in a verbal, personal, whatever kind of sense, but they're disharmonious profile in a much more complex sense. Because they're at a different level cognitively, than morally, than emotionally, than identity development, maybe even spiritually. And because they are so far apart in these levels, they tend to compensate. They start using their cognitive to compensate. Lack interpersonal. And that's why we don't see it. But that's usually kind of postponing the inevitable, where it does tend to go wrong. And that's why it's so important to have a view of it. Have a view of A, what level are you at? But B, how can there be this disharmonious problem between the levels? This was in, quite a high pace, a lot of information about spiral dynamics and looking from a levels perspective and linking that up with a number of things that you can do in the digital age and what are the risks and what are the possibilities at these different levels.